This is the September 27th meeting of the Mansfield Town Council, and I'm calling the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Ms. Chain, would you call the roll, please?
Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot. Here. Bruder.
Mr. Bruder says he's on his way.
Coleman.
Here.
Cotton.
Here.
Fertoni. Moran.
Here.
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
And I believe Mr. Fertoni is also on his way. All right, the first item of business is approval of the minutes of September 12th. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Ms. Berthelot moves. Is there a second? Ms. Cotton seconds. Any comments, corrections? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, I don't have the minutes in front of me, but Dr. Cotton's appointment came earlier in the meeting, and it's further down in the minutes where it should be. I think it should be, it shows her voting on motions, and her appointment was earlier than stated in the minute. I think you ought to move the appointment up to the appropriate time.
There was a motion to move the agenda, so she was up very early. The minutes should reflect that. All right.
So I guess the question is, staff's recollection is that took place, I guess, immediately after the public hearing, but your recollection is it took place before the public hearing? Because it's shown as right after so it was moved up in the agenda, but immediately following the public hearing before any other business. So I think staff thinks it's accurately sequenced.
That would be an appropriate place.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought you were implying that it was at the bottom of the agenda in old business. And welcome, Mr. Fertoni. Okay, now, wait, I can't get to it on this. Wait a second. No, we're still, Ms. Chain, there's the call to order, there's the roll call, there's the public hearing, there's the opportunity for the public to address the council, and then we go directly to the town report of the town manager. I thought Ms. Coleman was appointed before that.
Yes, Madam Mayor, if you look
Sorry,
under public hearing, and the public hearing was open, it was closed, and there's the last paragraph of the public hearing is the motion where 9D was considered moved to now. So 9D was still 9D. 9D was not changed to a different item.
Not changed to a different
just
number,
wanna note
but it
that.
was achieved, and it certainly wasn't under the public hearing. So can we pull that out and indicate that that motion occurred not as part of the public meeting, a public hearing, but independently?
Sure.
And can we also say that Ms. Cotton was appointed at that time?
Sure, yes.
Okay, thank you. That works for me.
Yeah, that makes more sense. All right, with those corrections or amendments, are we ready to vote on the minutes? All those in favor, please raise your hand. The minutes are unanimous as amended. All right, the next item of business is the opportunity for the public. Is there anybody here from the public who wishes to address the council? Mr. Aylesworth, have you received any commentary that needs to be read into the record?
I have not.
All right, then we will declare the opportunity for the public to address the council closed. And now the report of the town manager. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start off my report with the multimedia application here. place to hide this. There we go. Okay. So I want to start off just on a personal and professional note and just express a huge congratulations to the Downtown Partnership. I thought, this is our my second Celebrate Mansfield Festival that I've been a part of. Last year was a little bit more subdued coming out of the pandemic. Participation, I think, across the board from vendors to just general, public foot traffic was a little down. This past Saturday was hustling and bustling, and it was a great weather day. A little bit windy in places. I know that the town manager's office tent seems to always find a nice wind tunnel. But it was really well attended. Seemed to be a lot of public interest. It was great to see so much participation within our municipal ranks, the resident trooper's office, the public library, Parks and Rec, fire department, Mansfield Public Schools, Neo Smith. And of course, staff from my office as well. And I want to also make sure to thank our Department of Public Works and our Facilities Management Department for their support. But Taste of Mansfield was there, the Arts Advisory Committee, Human Rights Commission, all were hosting tables. And I know a lot of fun was had in particular. This is at the town manager's office table. Staff had a really creative idea to ask people what they love about Mansfield, as well as what year they started calling Mansfield home. And as these pictures show, there were a wide range of people that stopped by, different ages and demographics, and just great to see that full spectrum, including people that have spent their entire life in Mansfield, whatever year that was. And so again, just I thought it was great, a great event. Already looking forward to next year's event, and just want to be sure to thank everybody that made it such a smashing. That I will stop the screen share. So a few items to report on. I already alerted the council to this, but in the interest of sort of public disclosure and public announcement, we do have a new quote-unquote permanent director of planning and development, Jennifer Kaufman, who's worked for the town for many years as a senior planner and inland wetlands agent. And has been serving the last several months as the acting director of planning and development. I'm very pleased to announce that she's been selected as the next director of planning and development. She did, she gave a great account of herself during the interview process, which was multiple panels, and certainly made Jen earn it. Despite being a known quantity, she still had to earn it. And I think she's just going to do a stellar job. The challenges and opportunities are large. We certainly have a lot going on the economic development front and residential development, proposed development, particular multifamily housing, and obviously bold, ambitious, affordable housing goals, and looking to move forward with the implementation of our recently finalized affordable housing plan and the work of the Affordable Housing Committee and the trust fund that's been set up. But Jen, her enthusiasm is palpable. She has a huge love for this community, which she and her family have called home for many years. She knows the community inside and out. She knows the stakeholders very well. She has great working relationships with all the players involved. And so really the only problem with elevating Jen in this position is it creates another vacancy in the department that now has to be filled and filled expeditiously so that we have a full complement of staff in the planning and development department. But I'm sure the full council will join me in congratulating Jen on her appointment, and certainly look forward to all the important work that department will be focusing on in the year ahead. Also related to staff and staff transitions, I know at the last meeting, I think it was the last meeting, maybe it was just an email, it's hard to remember at this point, but the council was informed that Holly Schaefer, our HR director, will be retiring. She'll be retiring actually the end of next week. And so given the somewhat tight turnaround, I put wheels in motion a couple weeks ago to begin the process of reaching out to potential interim HR director candidates, and happy to report that we found an individual. His name is Lee Palmer. He'll actually be starting next week, so that he overlaps a week with Holly and can work with Holly directly for about a week during that transition. Lee's very experienced, very capable, has a background both in state and local HR, but also finance and administration. So I think his many decades of experience in that area will help us bridge the gap until a new HR director is identified. But I want to certainly thank Holly for her service to the town. Holly came to the town from the private sector, navigated quite a learning curve, having come from a totally different sphere. But she's been a consummate professional the last 2.5 years, and she will be missed on both a personal and professional level. And we'll have our work cut out for us to find the next director of HR. The downtown partnership staff and myself were working on rolling out the next iteration of the local business and nonprofit relief fund program. Council approved a modified version of a round 2 for that program at the last meeting. This will now be opened up to include members of our nonprofit community. Nonprofits weren't eligible the first go-around, so for all intents and purposes, the eligibility criteria will remain the same, except for the fact that now local nonprofits will be eligible to apply. And once we roll that out in the next few days, we'll have basically a 4-week period for eligible organizations and businesses to apply. Council is aware that I was invited some months ago, time flies, some months ago, to serve on the advisory search committee for the next Yukon president. That process is winding down. I and others took part in interviews with finalists this past Friday, and to underscore, the advisory committee's role in this is, as the name implies, advisory. We're certainly not making decisions on who will be offered the position, just providing input that will be considered by the steering committee and the board of trustees. But that input, based on last week's interviews, has been provided, and the trustees, as I understand it, will likely be making a decision very soon, and obviously that'll be publicly announced immediately thereafter. But want to reemphasize my appreciation to the University of Connecticut for reaching out to the town, reaching out to me, and offering this opportunity to ensure that local perspective, local official perspective, was part of the mix and the different stakeholders involved in the process. We have year 2 of the Local Government Academy in full swing. We are now 2 sessions deep. First session was an overview of governance and administration, municipal finance, HR, town clerk's office, and elections. And then this past week, the focus was on what collectively is called inspection services. So they heard from the fire marshal and emergency management director, building and housing director, and the Eastern Highlands Health District. And this week, we have DPW on the docket. I know the mayor's expressed a desire to attend that session, so we'll be at the DPW garage on Thursday. And lots of different equipment and accessories to show, and a little bit more physically active maybe than the last 2 sessions were.
For all the years I've been on council, I've never had a tour of Public Works, so this is my big chance.
And I know if last year's crew is any indicator, there was a lot of eye-opening moments. People, I don't think, had a full appreciation for just how far and wide DPW's roles and responsibilities go, how much, different roads and land and et cetera that are maintained by the town. And I think in particular, when it came to the grounds crew talking about sidewalks and parks and rec properties, I think that was really eye-opening for a lot of people. So looking forward to that. Just a few other items. We will soon, and by soon I mean probably by the end of the week, be officially posting the Human Services Director position. Council will remember that some months ago, Pat Schneider informed me, and then I subsequently informed you, that at the end of this calendar year, she's going to be joining her husband in retirement. With the benefit of that sort of advance notice, we are now beginning the process of recruiting her successor, and hopefully a few months will be enough time frame to do that. It'll be big shoes to fill for sure. We also, in the next several weeks, once we hopefully have a lead on the next Jennifer Kaufman, if you will, and a full complement of staff in the planning department, we're looking to kickstart the neighborhood stabilization planning process for the Hunting Lodge Road area. Council obviously approved funding for that effort. We anticipate this will be, a years-long effort, and will be heavily focused on stakeholder engagement, not just the people that live in the immediate area, but stakeholders throughout the community. And I know there's been a lot of interest, both in the status of that plan, as well as wanting to see that the town start to make progress on a number of the goals laid out, affordable housing goals laid out in the affordable housing plan. And from a staff standpoint, we're very eager to begin that important work. Maybe the last couple items, installation of the new playground and resurfacing at the Mansfield Library is underway. This has definitely been a collaborative effort. Parks and Rec, Public Works, Facilities has been involved as well in terms of the new circulation desk that's going at the library. So a lot of upfits at the library. And our library director, Leslie McDonough, has been getting a lot of really favorable feedback on the improvements going on at the library. So thank you very much to the council for the support that you've extended to that. And maybe since the fire chief's here, he might find a way to speak to this during one of his updates later on. But I'll just say on behalf of the department, we're all very excited to see additional forward progress on the acquisition of the new Quint apparatus. The committee that's been charged, the truck committee, if you will, that's been charged with speccing this out. They met on September 16th for a pre-construction meeting. They provided that feedback to the vendor that's building the rig, and the process really will be getting started in earnest now. Unfortunately, these things take time, and we're not expecting delivery until mid-2024, which is quite a ways away, but it's as ambitious a timeline as we could expect, and that was true across all the different vendors that we spoke to during this process. So with that, I will end my report there and field any questions that the council may have.
Questions for the town manager? Mr. Coleman?
Thank you, Mayor. Seems as though the town manager's report is always full of good news. You don't seem to cover any of the bad news. For one, there's something about our busing issues, which have been obviously kind of a crazy time for all of us here in town. Can you update us on that a little bit, Ryan?
Well, I know that there's plans in place. He was actually going to be here tonight if it wasn't for a conflict with a conference, out-of-state conference. Superintendent Dart will be meeting with the council probably as early as the next meeting to speak to the status of the elementary school project, and I think was going to provide a little more of a detailed debrief on the busing situation at that meeting. And obviously the district has been kind of the lead, and naturally, since this is after all a school children transportation issue. I'll let the content of the report kind of speak for itself, other than to say, I know on a daily basis, based on the conversations that I'm having with the superintendent and his central office staff and others in the school district, that they take these issues incredibly seriously, and they're working very diligently with M&J, the bus company, to work through the issues that have arisen. The reason for the issues are multifaceted, and certainly a shortage of bus drivers, is kind of high on that list. But the district, by everything I'm seeing, is kind of pulling out all the stops, recognizing the pain points for families that this has caused. Everything from inconveniences to some frankly scary situations where people didn't know where their kids were over an hour after they expected them to be delivered. And I think the situation's improved a lot. I think the superintendent, if he was here, would say that there's still a lot of improvement that he'd like to see happen. And he's trying to get, I think, creative with some of the solutions that might be able to be deployed, including, as the report said, use of other town vehicles, vans, and leveraging perhaps some other drivers that could transport kids using a smaller vehicle like a van to try to help cover some of these gaps when they emerge. But I would suggest that the council, maybe reserve the bulk of this kind of back and forth for an evening, hopefully in early October, when the superintendent can be here.
Also, the Board of Education Transportation Committee will meet on Thursday, September 29th. What location is that meeting going to be at, and is it going to be publicly recorded?
I don't have the answer to those questions. I'm not organizing the meeting, but happy to share that
Yeah,
information
it's
with the
2
council.
days away.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think everybody would like to
Yeah,
know.
I believe the meeting was posted, noticed online. I don't have that notice in front of me, but I believe it was publicly noticed with information about location and access. But
Okay. And a little bit, touch a little bit on the elementary school. The last school building committee, I had noticed that they left out the ADA or the handicap push buttons on the main entrance of the school. I mean, how does that happen? That's something that should be automatic. I can't even believe that we'd leave out an ADA issue on the school and then have to go back and repair it. It just seems to me that there's no oversight on that job, and I don't know how you can sleep at night. You talk about progress, but you don't say anything about the setbacks. I really don't see how that school's even going to open in 2022, just looking at it. As a town councilor, I can't sleep at night, and I have to speak up. I'm not alone in this opinion anymore either. You know, I'm glad to see that some people are coming forward in an agreement on what a mess it is up there at that elementary school. We need some oversight, and that's your responsibility. If you see problems, you're supposed to come to the council and notify us of problems so that we can act. I don't think you're doing your job, Mr. Manager.
I also serve on that committee. I'm not on the working group, which Mr. Aylesworth is on, which deals with the construction manager on a weekly basis. I will say there is a great deal of oversight. The fact that things are being discovered that were not up to our standards is a sign of the fact that there is oversight and people are watching very carefully. I will say this is an incredibly complex process. We are building the first net neutral school in the state. There are things to learn, and there are multiple systems that are necessary to make this building function and function correctly. There is not only a great deal of physical oversight, that is, our architect and our consultants are on site on a at least weekly, if not daily basis. In addition, we have owners' representatives who monitor all of the paperwork, all of the billing, all of the reporting, and there are regular reports to the committee as a whole, as well as more in-depth and more heavily negotiated dealings in at the working committee level. So I think, Mr. Coleman, that it's very easy from a distance to be really critical, but I've watched this pretty closely, and I have had some concerns with the delays. But I don't think that, I do think that the system we have set up for monitoring the construction project has been extremely functional. And so I really disagree with your conclusions about the management of the project. Any other questions for Mr. Aylesworth? All right, then we will proceed. Ms. Berthelot.
Thank you, Mayor. The one is the comment of just how fabulous the Celebrate Mansfield Festival was, thanks to your staff and all the volunteers. It truly was wonderful. The things that I'm hoping to maybe hear more from, and I know he's going to talk later, from Sergeant Merrill. We've had some incidents in town. I don't know how much is confidential and what is not. But there was an incident at EO, and there was an incident at the Eastbrook Mall that I'm hoping we can get updates on.
You wish to answer, Mr. Anderson?
I agree that, you know, the state of play on the two incidents that you're referring to, I would defer to the sergeant, so, because he would be in the best position to say what can and can't be disclosed in a public session.
Okay. All right, any other questions for the town manager? I also would like to thank the university volunteers. We had dozens of volunteers, of young people volunteering before, during, and after the whole program. So it was really terrific. And the music was good. Unfortunately, it got pretty cold by the end of the evening, and the concert didn't last quite as long as expected. But I got thoroughly chilled, and I wasn't even out there the whole time. So anyway, it was a great success. Anything from council members, reports and comments from council? Yes, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you, Mayor. On top of the great job that everybody's already mentioned for Celebrate Mansfield, I had an opportunity to bring my dad from Pennsylvania, who never has seen anything like this, and he comes from a little town, and it was just, you know, the partnership always does a really good job, and I really appreciated all the different booths that we had, and it was neat, like, to kind of give him some background on as to why we were using reusable spoons and not just the disposable ones, where, again, I think it was the UConn students willing to kind of manage some of that, and it just maybe will hopefully be a convincing way to say, come on up here instead of staying in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Osberger.
I would just like to add to that it was very interesting meeting your dad.
Mr. Coleman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to speak a little bit about political process in the town of Mansfield. And maybe us, the people watching at home, can understand how things work in this town.
Point of order, Mayor.
The council is made up of 6
Mayor, I have a
Democrats.
point of order.
Mr. Shaken, what is your point of order?
What item of the agenda are we on, Mayor?
We're
This
on
is-
reports of
Coleman
council
speaking of
members.
reports.
This is
reports of council members? Sorry,
and
I
I'm
missed
just
that.
making a comment, Mr. Shaken. Okay. So to give people an understanding of how things work in this town, there are 9 council members, 6 which are Democrats, and 3 which are Republicans. The minority party, the Republicans, are not involved in any way in the formation and the creation of the packet, what's in the packet, what's on the agenda. We are given the packet the Friday before the meeting, and we're expected to do all our due diligence by Monday, which gives us 1.5 business days to do that. I don't believe the minority party is included enough in our political process. I really think the minority party should be involved in the creation of the packet and the agenda and have some sort of, I mean, that's how politics are supposed to work. It's supposed to be where people toss back ideas, and right now the minority party is really has no input in our political process when it comes to the creation of the packet and the agenda and our town council meetings, and I'd like to see that change.
For information for the public, the town charter says that the only power that the mayor has is to set the agenda and to convene and call the meetings. People who read our packets will notice that at the bottom of every agenda, there's an opportunity to request items for future agendas, and that is where members can make those requests. The packet as a whole goes out to the entire council on Friday. So it is not just the 3 members of the minority party who only get a day and a half to look at it. with the exception of the mayor and the deputy mayor, all of the members of the majority party have the same period of time to look at it. The deputy mayor and the mayor meet with the town manager a week before to talk about content. Occasionally, things get added as they have developed over the week, so that sometimes we haven't seen all of it before it goes out in the packet either. So this is the structure of Mansfield's town government as established by our charter, which is the town's, essentially the town's constitution. When people are impressed because I'm a mayor, I always say, oh, the only thing I get to do is to chair the meetings and to help and to set the agenda, but that's, and I also get a parking space, but that's not in the charter. So there's no provision in the town charter for members of the minority party to participate in the setting of the agenda. Mr. Coleman.
I want to express my disappointment. I've tried to get a lot of future agenda items put on the town council agendas, and I haven't had much luck doing so. I think it gets nixed by the mayor or the deputy mayor long before it can get onto the agenda.
Any other comments from council members? All right, the next item on our agenda is an empty consent agenda, and we have no old business on this agenda, so now we move to new business, the Child Car Seat Installation Certification Program. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Mayor. While Chief Mitchell and Sergeant Merrill get comfortable in their seats, I'll just briefly introduce this. So I think probably all of us, to some degree, are at least loosely familiar with the National Child Passenger Safety Certification Program. Certainly those of us who have kids, and I won't raise my hand here, but those of us who maybe were at the hospital and realized that they hadn't gotten the car seat installed yet and had some discreetly kind of maybe get a breather and go away and come back a few minutes later after they retained the help of a member of a police department nearby. So we all have varying degrees of familiarity with this. Sergeant Merrill and Chief Mitchell can walk the council through the sort of enhanced engagement and commitment to this program that we're doing here at a local level.
I'm not sure if, let's see.
Make sure you're speaking directly into the microphone.
There we go. All right, so the child safety seat program, traditionally in the state of Connecticut, has been all encompassed by state police, local PDs. It's a very good program for those that are not familiar with how to use the car seats safely and the additional changes with car seats, with safety upgrades and vehicle upgrades, and how to integrate both. Traditionally, police departments, fire departments, they send their personnel, they get the training, and it's about a week long, and it's a hands-on type of training where they go through all the different various types of car seats. They discuss the cars and where to attach the safety latches and hidden areas and all that kind of stuff. The important thing about it now is because on the state police side, and then I'll let Chief Mitchell speak on his behalf, but as far as the state police right now, due to the promotions and transfers, retirements, currently right now we have 0 troopers in Mansfield that are certified. And I foresaw that was a problem for the town of Mansfield. I want to help integrate our office so that it's more family orientated. They can come to us, talk to us about simple things to include this car safety seat program. This car safety seat program will allow us to show up on scenes and also allow us to work in conjunction with the fire department to do a public forum, make an announcement, have the public show up, show our experience, pass along our training, and then show them how to do it safely and what is recommended for safe car seats for new parents and current parents. And they also talk about the different ages, weights, and the various things that the car safety seats kind of glaze over, but if you're a parent, you know, you have a lot going on and you really don't understand that if you have an infant and you have a 2-year-old and so forth, you don't understand that there's different phases or steps of different car seats for safety purposes. So that's kind of the goal here. The chief and I worked together on trying to get this training up here. Initially, we were told we were not going to get the training until February of next year, but we were relentless in speaking with the staff for the state of Connecticut, and luckily both of us were able to convince them to do it next month. So that moved up the timeline, which will help the town of Mansfield sooner, quicker, and make it safer.
Yeah, the dates for the certification course are November 15th to the 18th. And the last day of the course, the members are going to be trained how to do the installs, and also part of this is that older car seats are no longer useful. So there is that lifespan in a car seat from years ago. And I look at this from a standpoint of, since my tenure here, every so often we'll get a phone call in the office, from someone, from general public, looking to see if we did car seat installs or could check car seat. And we didn't have anybody trained to do that. And so this is a partnership between, fire and police to, be able to offer this program, and also through community events like the downtown festival this past Saturday. In the future, we'll be able to offer that and have a booth for folks to come by, and we'll be able to check their car seats. I can tell you this program, once we get our people trained, it's going to take off. I had it in my previous community I served, and I had a technician, and she stayed pretty busy, really 4, 5, 6 times a month. We had people coming to the firehouse to either have their car seats installed because they were having a newborn soon, or they had a new car seat that they needed to have checked or installed. So this is definitely going to be a great program for the community. And from what we understand is there's really not a lot of communities in Eastern Connecticut that offer this. So once the word gets out, I could see this becoming, serving the public as a whole. So.
It sounds like a great idea. And again, one of the things about Mansfield that has always been impressive is the willingness of the various departments to collaborate with one another. So thank you very much for doing this together. It's obviously going to be a benefit. Questions for the fire chief, Mr. Shuren?
Yeah, I just want to say that this is an advantage not only to parents, but also grandparents.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, maybe especially the grandparents. Ms. Berthelot.
Just say thank you so much. Car seats save lives. There's no question about it. They make all the difference in the world. And I know the people that you work with see that firsthand. So this is such an important initiative. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman.
Yeah, I think this is going to be very well received in the community. I remember being a parent myself and asking for assistance in that, and there was some programs available at the time. I think this is a great idea. Thank you for doing it.
Any other comments? Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing the announcement of your first training session. I think there are a number of us who will be lined up.
I believe there's going to be a blurb in the next newsletter because our communications.
Great. Thank you. Well, don't go anywhere, because the next thing on the agenda is a review of fall off-campus activity. Mr. Aylesworth, you want to do an introduction?
Certainly. The council has requested and been provided on a recurring annual basis a summary of activities during the fall semester. Usually this briefing happens at about this point. And we have with us the police, the Sergeant Merrill, our resident trooper supervisor, our fire chief, and our director of building and housing that can provide a report on enforcement activities. So I'm not sure if you guys flipped a coin to see who's going to go first.
Might as well start. Okay, so I just have, as of right now, the date on our activity update for September is the 23rd, so this is about a few days old. I will say, when I looked at the statistics from previous year, the statistics were pretty similar as far as the number of responses that we've had for disturbances, the amount of calls that we received. However, last year was a little unique due to still going through COVID, so things were a little different. We have seen an increase in some of the calls as far as more parties on off campus, as I'm sure everybody here is already familiar with. We are working diligently to try to curb some of that behavior. We have issued more tickets for that to try to help curb this gathering of students and loud music. We have fielded a lot of speeding complaints. When the students are back in, we get a lot of complaints on the side roads, especially leaving campus and jumps into the side municipal roads and state roads. We currently have worked with UConn and in collaboration due to some of the speeding complaints, specifically over on South Eagleville. We've had some issues, and they have graciously decided to donate to the town at this point, not 100%, but loan, I should say, the solar speed enforcement signs that give you that visual what your speed is. Now, the other part of it is education, talking to students, which we are going to go forward with that. And the other portion of that is us with enforcement, right? So we have specifically taken in the complaints from the town, and we have positioned troopers at these locations at the request of the public. And if we've seen any increase in traffic flow and speeding, we're working on that. We can't obviously be on every road for every call, but we're doing on a need basis right now. And I believe that these signs that we're going to get are going to at least assist with slowing traffic down, and that is our hope. And as far as any arrests, we have increased our arrests minor when it comes to the fall campus type of activities. And that's all I have for an update as far as the fall activities.
There was a question earlier about the two incidents, one at E.O. Smith and one at the Eastbrook Mall around Applebee's, I gather. Those are not part of the off-campus activity, I assume, but I'm not sure. So could you respond to that question?
I sure can. That is separate. Any fall activities that I'm referring to are typically related to the off-campus responses to UConn and loud noise complaints, speeding complaints. So in particular with the Eastbrook Mall incident and the E.O. Smith incident, I can speak generally to each of them. However, they, as you all know, they are both currently active investigations. Our major crime is investigating both of those incidents. So I am not at liberty to mention any details on it. However, I can just kind of mention the Eastbrook Mall incident. As far as my knowledge goes, is that it is an isolated incident. There's no threat to the public when it comes to that incident in particular. And, our major crime unit is working diligently on that. I speak with our major crime sergeant at least a few times a week now on that. I was speaking with him daily, several times during the day, just to see where we were with the case and make sure that the public was safe. So, are there any questions on the shooting?
Most importantly, I wanted to hear that your assessment that there wasn't a present danger for the community, and I appreciate the update. I appreciate that an investigation is going on and that you can only tell us so much, but that's important information. Thank you.
No problem. So I will go to E.O. Smith. So E.O. Smith, we did receive a bomb threat via email, and it is currently being investigated by our major crime unit as well. I have spoken with the major crime sergeant at length about that as well. it appears that I can't say that the subsequent emails to other schools were related, but there were subsequent schools. I'm sure you're aware in the news. So we are working to see if they are related or if they are not. And that is part of the major crime investigation right now. And obviously, they are working diligently on that. We want to make sure our schools are safe. We want to make sure that, you know, we are doing everything we can to prevent these type of incidents reoccurring or creating any type of, you know, civil disorder due to people making these type of comments or threats. So we are working to make sure that we get every detail and work together to, you know, find out as much as we can to prevent it.
Any other questions regarding police? Mr. Osberger?
I recall growing up and being in the community and going to E.O. Smith that there were a few times in my tenure there where there were some bomb threats, and they seemed to always center right around an exam time.
Well, that was the tradition in the old days. Now, the
Right.
new days, we're a little bit more nervous about, because other things seem to happen. Okay, Mr. Coleman.
Thanks for coming tonight. I know you've only been here a short period of time, but I'm interested in finding out how effective our nuisance ordinance is, or how good of a deterrent it is to keep noise down and reoccurring complaints from happening in our neighborhood.
So we have several steps that we go through. We have, you know, initial, we make contact with noise complaint, depending on size, depending on cooperation, depending on how many times we've been there, what the situation. We have to evaluate each situation differently. So, you know, speaking to someone and it's a gathering of 10 people and they had music going, traditionally we go there and we just say, hey, we got a call and keep the noise down, but it's documented. So if we have to return, then subsequent is usually a ticket. And then after that, if we return again, then it's an arrest. And that's typical for every single call we go on. And that's the standard that we've set. That's the standard that we have. Traditionally, when we make contact with these houses and these students, they understand that, you know, we're going to take the law enforcement side of it, but also UConn is involved as well. So I report anything that's extraordinary as far as, you know, arrests or anything like that with UConn. I speak with them, and they determine if they're going to take some type of action on them over at UConn. And lots of times that is more of a deterrent sometimes than a ticket, so I understand what you're saying. So that's why we do a collaboration with UConn, because, you know, if you tell a student, yeah, you got a ticket for a loud party, but then you tell a student, hey, you might not be going to UConn anymore. And parents find out about that. It's a little bit more of a deterrent. So that's kind of our goal there.
Have you had any repeat issues this year?
We've had one.
Like big parties, little parties?
The one that I'm mentioning was what big party.
There's always been a concern with parties that spill over onto major highways. Have you had any difficulty with that this year?
We have one, that same one.
Okay, that's what I wondered. All right, any further questions? Mr. Coleman?
Yeah, this was for Chief Mitchell. When school's in session, it must tax our fire and ambulance services more. Am I accurate in saying that?
In theory, it could, but if you look at our numbers for September from last year to this year, we're actually down. You know, we provide aid into the university when the 2 ambulances are out with the university's fire department, and they also provide resources to us when our ambulances are out. So it all depends. This year here, for some reason, our numbers are down. But I can say right now, we're not being taxied. We're handling our workload. There is a time like it happened last week where we were tied up with a fire and we had to utilize mutual aid for a medical call. So, but right now, which is good to see that our numbers for September are down, and, the students, been back in town for, if you look at their move-in time, so,
Month.
their school schedule been in for about a month. So, not to say that couldn't change in October, November, and early December as the semester moves forward.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bruder.
I thank you both for coming out and giving us the information you have. Short of more personnel, is there anything that you need from us that would make your job easier? I think that's what one of my colleagues was getting at with maybe the ordinances or something like that. But is there, just while we have you here?
I think at least for the resident trooper's office, some of the things that we need to kind of look going forward is more training for the troopers. It's unique to have such a young resident trooper office as I do. And with that comes that youth of excitement on the job and proactivity and being proactive. However, additional training that is offered typically most of the resident troopers already have, and because they're usually seasoned troopers and things like that. So I think going forward, I may be asking for financially as far as for more training that would benefit the town. And I am I'm very pro training, and I believe that, in conjunction with UConn as well, I've incorporated them with training with my troopers as well, because they are right next door, and we do work well together. So going forward, more or less, it's going to be training and equipment for that training to better serve the town.
Yeah, this council has always been very aware that our population is not the normal population, and it's not generally my age range that causes the problems, but, so the need for education for our young people is, in some ways, has to come from the police as well as from everybody else. So it's a very important role, and I think my guess is that training would be something that we would support.
Yeah, and to add to my colleague's comments was, from the fire side, it would be joint training between fire and police with emergency responses to any type of large crowds that kind of get out of hand. So from that standpoint, can't stress that enough. So we're prepared. And even, because of our staffing, we'd be calling for more help, but having that initial training for that initial response amongst the two agencies would be very, very helpful.
That sounds like a really good idea, yeah. Anybody else have questions for these two gentlemen? Because we have Mike Ninto on the, virtually with us, to talk about housing inspection. Mr. Ninto, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, included in your packet are the 4 spreadsheets I typically do, get to you at this time of year for this presentation. Pretty normal, the numbers right now, where we are regarding the blight, the overcrowding, the off-street parking, and complaints that come in. They're all right about where they normally would be. We are definitely seeing an uptick in overcrowded properties that we're having to involve the town attorney on, which for some reason, I'm not exactly sure why, but there definitely has been an increase in that. But we are working with the town attorney to typically try and get injunctive relief, so that, if it can only have 3 and it has 4, we can have the injunction state that they have to have the 3, and then we have a court order that we can work with. So that's much more.
Nice. Is that all students, or are there?
It's all rental
Well,
properties.
Yeah, I mean, are all the overcrowded?
Correct.
You have other people than students occupying these houses that are overcrowded?
We don't really have a way of knowing for sure. We obviously we do not ask. You know, granted, there's a certain you kind of a college student when you see it versus perhaps family or something of that nature. But we do not track that information specifically.
Yeah, I know, for example, there's been some problems with a house in a neighborhood that I'm familiar with, and they were not students. They're both obstreperous and maybe some overcrowding, but it was not a student group.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Ninto? Nope. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your contribution. This update is really important. The really nice thing about these updates is it used to be much more serious than it is. And granted that these parties that spill over onto 195 and cause real hazard, and where kids are drinking themselves into oblivion are worrisome, but it did used to be much worse. So it's good news. Yes, Mr. Osberger.
Just one last one. I noticed Route 44, right next to the trailer park, you guys had out there the other day. That becomes some new problem?
I believe what you're referring to is we went there for a typical party, loud
Yeah.
noise, students, and it was dispersed by our troopers.
It was.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Then thank you very much,
Thank you.
and have a pleasant evening, and we will move on
Thank
to
you.
Mansfield Middle School roof repair. Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Jorgensen, I believe.
And actually, Mr. Corson, Alan Corson, our
Mr.
Director of
Corson.
Facilities, will be kind of leading this presentation, which I'll pull up here. Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Corson.
So just to tee this up for Alan, I know we spend a fair amount of time reviewing and discussing the status of the new elementary school, which is obviously a very big, significant community project. But lest we forget, we have another significant school construction project, and that's the replacement of the middle school roof and the associated roof-mounted photovoltaic system. So Mr. Corson, and looks like Mr. Jorgensen's here as well, will provide the council an update on the status of that project and answer any questions you have. So, Alan.
Hey, good evening. I'll give Paul a time at the end to talk after I go through my little presentation. So, and then he can help fill in on any other questions anyone. So the roof project started a little bit over a year ago. The active roof part started in November of 2021, and it went to March of 2022. That was the roof part, and that was complete. Now, along the line, we had a lot of delays in materials. Insulation was a hard thing to get, and that actually delayed us to the November start date. So we were hoping to get that done in the summer of 2021. But the roof did complete in March of this year, and then solar became the next focus, and that also had a delay of solar panels. We did receive those, and we got those on before the summer ended. So solar is about 90% complete, and we are waiting now for a connection to the generator that we're looking to put in, which is delayed. So we're hoping this will all wrap up by December, with the generator hopefully coming a little sooner than that, but the planning for us to put the generator in will take a little bit, and probably a little bit of a break with school because we have to shut the whole school off. So I've got some pictures I'm going to show you, and then I'll let Paul talk to this also. I'm going to go pretty quick through this, but this is sort of from the start to the end on the roof, and if there's any questions along the way here, I can answer those too. The black part is what you call the first ply. There's insulation underneath that. And that goes down with hot tar. And then this part is the second ply. So when we talk of a 2-ply roof, that's what the 2 plies are. That's one of the drains. This is getting near the completion here. Now this I'm going to show you because we've had a couple of problems with some leaks. Most of it involves these drains. Again, on the left side you see the white metal flashing there. And on the right side, that's a fix that we've come up with where we're having the roofer put a membrane in there and then they seal that in. So now it doesn't, the water had been getting up underneath that metal flashing. As the drain, with a lot of rain, sometimes will back up. So that's been our fix and we're working on that. This is the solar up on the roof.
Yeah, I have a question. When you put the solar, that's a rubberized membrane roof, is that correct?
No, that's 2 plies of roofing, not rubber, but they do have a plastic pad under there, and I don't know if I show it well. And that helps, it holds those cement blocks, which are the ballast for this. But they also have a plan to anchor that down, so that's a piece that has to be done too.
So what's the life expectancy of the roof?
The life expectancy, the warranty is 20 years, and that is we would hope it goes at least 30 years, but 20 years is the warranty.
So we
on
put
it.
solar panels on top of a 20-year roof, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So how long are the solar panels going to last?
Solar panels are about 20 years also.
Okay. So they would have to be removed to repair or install the new roof, the next roof?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, your panels would be, you'd be looking at replacing them at about the same time you're doing the new roof again.
And by then, the technology will be totally different.
Correct. As we go through time, the wattage that you get from each of those panels rises, and the technology definitely keeps improving.
In fact, the delay to November actually produced a new technology that had to be installed.
What was the age of the last roof?
The age of the last roof was about 33 years. This is the part for the generator. The picture on the right with the cement pad to the right, that's where the new generator is going to sit. The small cement piece in front, that's where the transformer is going to sit for the school. So they're going to, the transformer is actually in the left picture there. That transformer is going to get replaced. And as it is, the wires that go from the pole to that transformer have asbestos coatings on it. So they're going to be replacing those wires also to that. But that goes on that other cement pad. And then the transfer switch and the connection to the solar are all there by that transformer that you see there. So with that, I also, Paul, if you want to speak to the project.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Paul Jorgensen with Silver Petroselli Architects. Thank you, Alan. As Alan had mentioned, the roof project, it definitely had its fair share of COVID supply chain issues, from procuring material, being able to get material to the site in a timely fashion. It was really, it strained the project, but the contractor was able finally to get everything and do the project. It was behind schedule, but it didn't affect the work, the quality of the work that was done. So we're happy with that. And overall, the quality was good. As Alan had mentioned, we have changed some of the original details, especially with the trench drains, which are a little bit unusual on most schools. You don't see those types of trenches often. So to modify that detail made perfect sense. And as Alan had mentioned, the second part of this is that photovoltaic part. I believe we have all the materials at this point awaiting the generator. So when that generator comes in, we'll be able to connect the panels in, connect with all the switchgear material, and then power up the school with those, hopefully as soon as December. But the delays have definitely affected not only the roof initially, but now the photovoltaic portion of the building. With that, I'll just leave it open to any questions.
Questions? Compared to the elementary school, this has seemed like a very simple project, but it had its shares of ups and downs, that's for sure. Mr. Bruder?
Thank you for coming and giving us this information. With 2 kids in the middle school right now, I appreciate that they don't have to worry about, with this heavy rain, the leaks that I've had, in the past. The only question is, there are no leaks, right?
Well, there's a couple that we're working on, but we are working on, and the contractor is being very responsive to us.
Perfect. But you guys are on top of it.
We
and
are.
I'm guessing nothing like it was
Nothing like it was.
a year ago.
Correct.
Yeah,
And we know what the problem is, so it's just sorting that out and getting it done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Osberger?
Yes, thank you, Alan. This is great, the news, the update, and it looks great. As far as the lighting is concerned in the school system, what kind of lighting do we have in there?
Lighting is LED.
It is.
And believe it or not, when we changed the lighting, I learned a lesson not to do that during the school year because it was too bright. So we actually took, even though we went to LED, we ended up taking half of the lighting out because of it being too bright. So you've even saved even further for that, so.
Very good.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Hang on, I
Oh,
got one.
Mr. Coleman?
Any cost overruns on that project?
On this project, no, we actually were under budget, but about 800,000 on this one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? No. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the report. Thank you for the good work. Have a pleasant evening.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is discussion of a panhandling request. You may remember that the owner of the building that houses Big Y had asked us to look into an ordinance to prohibit panhandling. Mr. Shaken and I had suggested that we talk with Mr. Deneen about these ordinances, if they exist. One of the cases I learned about in law school now 30 years ago it had to do with a New York City case where there were Hare Krishnas begging in the airports, and that was the case that the Supreme Court ruled that you could not prohibit panhandling. All you could prohibit was aggressive behavior. So I'm interested to see how the law has progressed since then. Mr. Aylesworth?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know that I have anything else to add other than, as you said, the genesis for Mr. Deneen being here was in response to a constituent request that the council examine this matter and consider the options. And so I will turn over the floor to our town attorney to share his legal perspectives on this topic.
Welcome, Mr. Deneen. We haven't heard or seen you in a while, so glad you're here.
I was off on a relatively brief vacation for a couple of weeks, and I'm happy to be back. And panhandling has been an issue that is obviously garnered a great deal of attention over the last several years, as it seems to be becoming more organized or what have you. But as the mayor indicated back from the Hare Krishna case in New York City, all the way up through Reynolds versus Middletown, which is another case, panhandling and asking for support has long been held to be a First Amendment right. Whether one is asking, whether it's the Boy Scouts asking for solicitation, I ran a number of things for the Little League Baseball asking, we did a coin drive. That sort of solicitation has always been held to be a First Amendment protected type of speech. The aggressive type of panhandling that's been targeted in various communities is something that's out there, but it's a very difficult area. It has to be absolutely content neutral. So whether it's addressing panhandling as sort of the colloquial way of understanding it versus your local volunteer firemen doing the fill the boot, which we had in East Hartford and Enfield and other places. It's the same sort of activity, and trying to regulate it on the basis of the content, asking for a particular beneficiary, runs afoul of the First Amendment, and it becomes a very strict scrutiny type case and very difficult to recommend or to regulate. To the extent that the activity implicates public safety, there's different ways. An individual on private property has the right to control that private property. So if that individual is having solicitors on his or her property, whether they're soliciting for the Avon lady or the Welcome to Town lady or personal panhandling, they have the right as a trespasser to deal with that. So there's ways of dealing with those things, but it's a very difficult area to enact broad-based regulations on that. There's a town in Oklahoma that just got hit for almost $1 million in legal fees to pay the other side because they overstepped those bounds. So it's a difficult area to wade into. But again, if it's someone who's intruding on a road or a private property, there are the normal sort of non-content-based regulations that we all have that can be enforced on that. So so that's sort of the general 100,000-foot level view of things. But I think the mayor's recollection of law school actually is still good law, and it's actually progressed further on that. There's a Reed case that came out of the Supreme Court a few years ago on signs that's now been applied to soliciting and free speech, where it's really driven that whole content-based regulation into a very high, strict scrutiny type analysis on that, and makes it very difficult to regulate those types of things. So I'd be happy to sort of discuss that, or any questions that the council might have, or members might have on that.
Would it be correct to say that your recommendation is that we do not try to do this at this time?
It would be. I mean, there's a number of towns. Weathersfield just recently enacted one. The ACLU is pushed back pretty hard on that. If an individual is either violating private property rights or public safety issues, we can deal with that under our currently existing laws. But there's not a my recommendation, let someone else be the guinea pig on this process, because it's a very difficult place to reconcile on that.
All right, Mr. Coleman, followed by Mr. Shaken, followed by Mr. Osberger.
Thank you, Attorney. I'm sure there's some towns out there that have ordinances regarding panhandling. Have you reviewed those? I see some of them must be successful.
I have, and I was involved in Enfield in acting theirs. It's a very very fine lines that has to be driven on that, and a lot of this was before the Gilbert case came out of the Supreme Court. So there's a lot of uncertainty exactly what will pass muster versus previously. Depending on what you're interested in pursuing, the difference between the Little League, we stood outside Dunkin' Donuts asking for donations, one Saturday every April. That's in the same category as far as the law is concerned on how to do that. And the law is changing and getting much more protective of those sort of First Amendment rights. And the First Amendment is not designed to make people comfortable. But if an individual is taking it or doing something in a place that endangers others or endangers themselves, we have trespass laws, we have public right-of-way laws that can deal with that. So yes, there are towns that are out there that are enacting that because I think it's been an issue that's people have felt driven to sort of deal with. It's getting a much tougher area in which to regulate, Councilman.
I just have a personal observation on the whole thing that I've witnessed myself. I had somebody working for me who lived at 560 Main Street in Willimantic, and picking him up and dropping him off. I saw the same folks that were at Big Y or the mall or at the Frog Bridge going in and out of their apartments. They're not homeless. They're frauds. I'm not saying all panhandlers are not frauds, but how do we approach that problem?
Well, I mean, and that's part of the First Amendment is that the inability to ask that question, and make that judgment. Is it fair that, and I'll call my own experience, the Little League gets to ask for that, but this other group doesn't. It becomes a very area of what's called strict scrutiny under the law that you really have to be able to justify at a very high standard why you're trying to make those distinctions. And right or wrong, that's the way the Supreme Court has decided those issues.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. I have one maybe fairly technical question about that strict scrutiny about the restriction we might have in content. So when people say panhandling, they're often talking about asking for money from people in some way. Does the restriction, and so what you've expressed is two different examples of who is asking for money essentially and for what purpose, one being someone who may be homeless, one being the Little League. Is that restriction to content also a restriction in terms of what the act is itself? So is asking, in one example, it might be asking for money. In another example, it might be, say, giving away political literature at the dump or something along those lines. When you're saying that there's no ability for us to regulate speech in terms of its content, only in terms of like it being aggressive or not, would, if we instituted an ordinance, would we also be sort of banning aggressive solicitation of things that aren't asking for money, so are not panhandling essentially, so like handing out political flyers on the side of the road or at the dump?
And that's really, Councilman Shagan, going right to the question that's been exposed with the Reed case out of the U.S. Supreme Court. That content-based asking for money versus, and I'll put it bluntly, asking for a vote. It's the approach, the asking for something. That content-based piece has really been directly addressed by the Reed course, but makes it much more difficult to regulate those things. And, if someone, again, I go back to, if someone is endangering themselves or others by soliciting or walking into the road, that's a trespass, that's public safety. But that distinction between why you're asking for something or what you're asking for becomes a very content-based regulation. And it will be very difficult to get that past the federal courts because it becomes a content-based regulation.
Okay, and then my second question, thanks, that's helpful. My second question is, when this first came up, I think it happened to be on a night when Sergeant Merrill was before the council on another issue, and he spoke to it and said, what we can enforce trespassing laws and we can enforce the state's right of way, but in a town without a panhandling ordinance, there's nothing really else we can do. Is what you're insinuating here that if we sort of went ahead and passed the panhandling ordinance and then asked the state police to enforce it, that we might actually run into some difficulty because it would be something that they would then be liable for if they enforced something and sort of overstepped into an area where a federal court might slap them down? Would they then, as an institution, be sort of named in a lawsuit that may come from this?
Yeah, it could be. I mean, what people generally complain about panhandling is particular behaviors or particular locations that are on that. And so a panhandling ordinance can really cover a wide range of activities. Most of the activities that people complain about are things that we can already deal with on either disturbing the peace or trespassing or impeding right-of-ways. There's things to do with that. But any kind of broad-based, it's absolutely clear that any kind of broad-based ban on panhandling as such is unconstitutional. And to invite or try to require another government agency to imply that or to apply that, I think would be, their counsel will tell you that they shouldn't do that. And if they do, they're going to look for some indemnity back to the town.
Thanks.
Mr. Osberger?
Thank you, Attorney Denny, for coming tonight. Would it serve us to, and perhaps this is, my question is actually twofold. Would it serve us, and perhaps this is only for the individual property owners, but would it serve us to have a loitering type of ordinance in place? No loitering kind of thing?
Well, Councilman Osberg, I haven't looked into that, but loitering is also protected by, I mean, gathering is protected by the First Amendment, the right to gather, to express your opinions and things like that. So I haven't looked into a great deal of the loitering sort of thing, but I can do that. But I think it falls into that same First Amendment right of people to gather in particular places to do those things. If someone wants to gather and sit on what's called a traditional public forum, they have the right to do that. And the First Amendment is not designed to make us comfortable. It's to allow that free exchange of ideas that may challenge us and make us uncomfortable. But that's sort of the price of the Constitution to allow that type of discussion going on.
I guess that's a pretty thin veiled discussion then, if we're
Yeah,
considering someone who's panhandling a free exchange of ideas.
Yeah, but fortunately or unfortunately, that's the way the Supreme Court has consistently decided that.
So then with that, are we just better served with referring people to social services?
It really is. And there may be people who don't, who are engaging in that activity or don't want to be referred to social services, but the Supreme Court hasn't differentiated that. And so whether an individual is asking for funds for a charity or asking for funds for themselves, the basis of that ask is not something that the courts have allowed the towns to differentiate between.
All right, thank you.
Who came first? Mr. Sherman, followed by Mr. Bruder.
So let me just make sure I understand. If on a public road, the presence of anybody, be it a Boy Scout or a panhandler, created some kind of sort of safety hazard, would a town be within its rights to ban solicitation by anybody at that spot?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if they're creating a danger to themselves or others, yes. I mean, for example, on the interstate highway system or the state highway system, at the exit ramps, the state has the right to ban people from standing on it. That's state property. You can't walk onto an airport. You can't walk onto state property without their permission. That's up to those states to, the state to regulate that. If they choose not to, there's not something a municipality can really challenge, but that's part of their right to do so.
Mr. Bruder?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if I should direct this to you or maybe to our esteemed town manager, but has there been an issue with safety in terms of, that's why we're having this review, other than a member of the public coming and asking for it? I mean, is there an ongoing hazard, in town that I'm just not aware of?
Mr. Aylesworth?
I'm not aware of any incidents that would be sort of universally regarded as a threat to anybody's health or welfare. I think, panhandling is an activity, takes on a variety of different forms, and some maybe people are more accustomed to or comfortable with than others, but I'm not aware of anything that's posed a direct threat to physical danger to anybody at this point.
In New York City, there were real problems with people who were offering to wash your windows for money. And I think that ultimately went to court, didn't it, Mr. Deneen? Do you have any idea how that?
Yeah, that goes back to Giuliani era, back on especially on the west side highway, when you come down and stop, people would rush out and wash your windshield. I believe that they handle that basically through the same public safety. It wasn't a content-based, like you can't walk out into a public road. The same way we have, you jaywalking, you've got to be in a legally authorized area to be there. So, that's the same sort of idea.
Follow up on that. If a private resident or corporation felt that they had too of an inviting entranceway, could they not just make modifications so then it would be more on the responsibility on them rather than us having to try to figure out thread this needle through the panhandling? And we've had a number of residents that they're not in favor of this, and from what I'm hearing, it's not a safety issue. So I think it's good that it's being reviewed, but in terms of how far this goes, I'm just trying to figure out how much resources are we going to put towards this.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if a property owner, whether it's an individual or a corporation or an LLC, ask someone to leave as their private property, they have the right to do so. And if they refuse to do so, it becomes a trespass, and they can pursue that, both criminally and civilly on that.
Thank you.
All right. So is there any interest from council members to pursue this topic? Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Shaken, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
This is kind of just a follow-up to what Mr. Bruder was saying. There was considerable discussion on social media about this over the last couple of weeks, and it went both ways. There were both sides of the issue. Some people were against it, some people were for it. The majority, from what I could have read, was that people were trying to direct people to social services. That's pretty much on both sides of the fence.
Mr. Shaken?
Thanks. Yeah, just to answer your question, Mayor, my opinion at least, especially, first of all, regardless of whether we could, I think there's a question of whether we should. And frankly, my opinion is that no, we shouldn't pursue this any further. In particular, because of Mr. Deneen's answer about whether we could, which appears to be basically no. What the owner of the Big Y Plaza is asking us to do expressly, we are forbidden from doing. Now, could we concoct a public safety hazard and get around it? Maybe, but I think if we were ever to be tested, we would have to prove it. And I haven't seen any evidence personally or presented by the Connecticut State Police, our fire department, or the town manager, that there's been a single safety incident whatsoever from folks politely asking for money on the side of the road next to parking lots with stoplights. I frequent that plaza, and I've never seen an issue. And I asked directly, a few months ago of Sergeant Merrill, and Ryan was just asked directly now, and no one can name a single time when there's been a safety hazard created by this in Mansfield. So I also think just as a community that we tend correctly to not try to push the issue with the ACLU. I think we have a community that tends to agree with the American Civil Liberties Union, and we've gone out of our way as a council to make sure that the things that we do take folks' civil liberties into consideration and take them into consideration sort of head on. And so I really wouldn't want to be a community that is trying to sort of restrict folks' civil rights. And even if there's civil rights that people don't like to see expressed, in this case, asking for money, I think any restriction on them would necessarily restrict other folks' civil rights to freedom of speech and freedom to gather. So I really don't think it's worth pursuing in any kind of way. I will say it's pretty clear that the property owner has taken the steps that he's allowed to take with under his rights to restrict the practice on his property. There's a nice bright white line painted on the sidewalk now in front of Big Y that denotes, I would imagine, where the public right of way ends and where trespassing begins. And its addition has changed the behavior of some of the folks who are asking for money. And I think it's perhaps decreased its frequency, had some folks move around, but regardless, that's their right to enforce, and I think they're doing it. So yeah, my recommendation, my opinion is that we shouldn't pursue this any further because number one, we shouldn't, and number two, we really can't. So thank you.
Ms. Berthelot?
Yes, thank you. I so very much would not support going forward with this. We have a long history in this country of criminalizing homelessness and disability. After World War I, many cities across the country made it illegal to be in public if you were ugly, essentially. If you'd been to war and you had been injured and you were no longer able to work in a factory, there weren't social supports in place, and you needed to be on the street asking for money, they didn't want to see you. They criminalized you and they locked you up. And it was not okay then, and it's certainly not okay now. The folks, it's difficult times now. Sure, there may be some folks who have a home, but they have another reason to be there. And I don't think we as a town should be in the business of pushing people away because they make us uncomfortable. We should be, as Charlie said, we should be supporting social services to the extent possible and making it ultimately so people don't have to beg. But if they're out there, we shouldn't criminalize that behavior. So I definitely would not support such an ordinance.
All right. I hear no inclination to proceed, so we will not proceed. So thank you very much for your input, Mr. Deneen. It's been very helpful. Just what we rely on you for, so thank you very much. And I think we'll move on with our agenda, if that's okay with everybody. Okay, any reports of council committees? Personnel?
We met prior to this meeting to talk about the town manager evaluation. We'll ask for an executive session at the conclusion of.
Okay, finance?
We have not met.
Okay, committee on committees.
We had a meeting that did not have a quorum, but if other members want to go back and watch that tape, and we did still go forward with some interviews, and then maybe we can do the vote on those at the next meeting.
Okay, so whoever was missing from that meeting can watch the interviews. Anything on departmental and advisory committee reports? Petitions, requests, and communications. I think some of this we have seen before. Anything for future agendas? Coleman.
I thought it was going to happen this week, but again, would like to request that the school building committee come before the council and address questions.
Mr. Aylesworth?
We'll make those arrangements again, just to reiterate, the superintendent is in Texas today and yesterday, today, and I think tomorrow. So that was the only reason why it didn't happen this week.
Okay, so we'll get a report soon. With that, I think we are ready to go into executive session. Mr. Reuter?
Speaking of quorum on the Committee on Committees, would it be something we need to do at this meeting to add a third member now that we only have two?
Ah,
Because the last meeting was before we became a full body town council.
okay, so Mr.
Dr. Cotton?
Oh, yes, would you like to be on Committee on Committees?
Yes, I would.
That was my-
She's been drafted. Okay.
That was my sneak around kind of way of getting her on.
Okay.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
it's one of the burdens of new members of the council that they get to spend a term or two on committees. And it's a great way to learn about stuff that the town does. It's a real good introduction. No, because now we have an executive session. No, we do not have a motion to go into executive session. Mr. Shuren.
I would like to move that the council go into executive session in accordance with Connecticut General Statutes, number 1-206A, for discussion of the town manager performance review.
And that would be just the town council.
Just the town council.
Okay, so we'll wait till the booth is shut off and, oh, all those in favor, yeah. Second, all those in favor, all right. We're in executive session. Let's just take a few minutes.
Recording stopped.
In the waiting room.